So before we get officially started, you all may move the chairs closer if you'd like to be closer. I feel like you're like forever away. But this is set up for their church service on Sunday, so we're a little hesitant to move their stuff. But if you would like to move closer to the stage, you're certainly welcome to do that if you'd be more comfortable.
We'll get close enough to spitball.
Fair enough. Come on up. Let's do it. Well, that works. Yeah, some people like us. That's fair. So welcome to our elections procedure night, June 2022. This is something that we started doing several years ago, doing before the election, just having a public night for people to come out, be able to ask questions, for us to present our procedures and what we do. We often have a lot of judges that show up, which we have tonight, and first-time judges. We always encourage them to come and hear a little bit more about what we're doing, and so we certainly appreciate that. But we've been doing this for several years. We invite candidates. We feel that it's important for candidates to understand the process. They don't always show up, but we put it out there for them too. And that way, if they have any questions, we can say, well, you should have come to the elections procedures night because we covered that. So something we've been doing for a while, and we enjoy it. We've switched things up a little bit. If you were here last fall, I see some faces I think were here last fall when we did it. But we'll cover some of the same stuff, but things are always changing as well. And so we'll do that. As we get started, I just want to let you know who's going to be presenting tonight. I think most of you probably know I'm Dallas Schroeder. I'm the clerk and recorder here. Behind me on my right, your left, is Rhonda Braun, our elections manager, and then Rachel Wilkins, who is on the elections staff. In the back, that's in charge of the audio, is Amanda Moore. And so if we sound bad, we know who to talk to. Right? Yeah. Amanda does a lot of things in the clerk's office. Elections is just one of them. So she's not full-time in elections, but she does a lot with elections. She's also the designated clerk to the board for the county commissioners. And that little phrase, as other duties as assigned, a lot of things fall on Amanda as the other duties as assigned. So I really appreciate these ladies. They all know their stuff. They know what needs to be done. They're hardworking, and I would hate to try and tackle an election without them. They do a fantastic job. So tonight, we're going over some of the procedures. You'll learn what happens from the moment a ballot gets to us, what happens during the programming process, how people are put on the voter rolls and removed. So there's going to be a lot of stuff in a short period of time. So hopefully we can get done in about an hour. I'm not going to promise that, but that's kind of our goal for the evening. So the first section that we're going to start with tonight is going to be Rhonda taking off, and she's going to talk about how we begin to program an election. We just started doing this at Elbert County just a couple years ago. Prior to that, we were beholden to Dominion to do the programming, and Rhonda decided she wanted to take that extra step on and do the programming herself, and so we've done that, and she does a great job with it, and she's going to tell you about all that's involved with it.
So 60 days before the election, we get ballot certification. Am I off of this one? You? Okay. We get ballot certification. So the state sends down who's on the ballot on a state level, and then on the local level, they sign paperwork with us. We enter all of that into the voter registration score. Do I need to do something different? Okay. We enter all that into SCORE, and we have a custom extract that we export and we import into the voting system, or into the Dominion system, and we program so that we have all the names on the ballots and all the issues and anything that's on the ballot. So we design the ballots and we proof. We put it into score first. We proof. We design the ballots. We generate the actual ballots, the PDFs that we're going to send to our vendor to print up and send out. And we proof because we don't want those to be wrong. We go ahead and run those through the tabulator, make sure they're going to read, and then we proof some more. We generate files and program the touchscreen machines. So if you've ever come in to vote in person, we have ballot marking devices where you can just make your selections on a touchscreen, and it'll print out a ballot with a QR code. And we proof those. We also have audio with those, so if we have somebody that needs to have that ballot read to them, they can plug in earphones and that ballot will be read to them and they can mark on that ballot marking device. So once we proof them some more, then we vote a lot. We kind of get tired of voting, believe it or not. And a funny thing, when we have our public test, our testers that come in represent the clerk appoints somebody from the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, and everybody has said the hardest thing is voting for that other person, because that's not somebody we'd normally vote for, but we want to test all the scenarios. So we test every single one. We have an internal test. The state refers to it as hardware and diagnostic testing. And as a staff, we go through and we test every ballot marking device. We test the tabulators. We just make sure that everything is reading correctly. We test all sorts of scenarios. If we overvote or leave ballots completely blank, we want to see if we just put a little mark in there, what's going to happen. We make sure that we test every scenario that we can think of so that when we get to the election, we don't have any surprises. Then we conduct, before every election, we conduct a public logic and accuracy test, and it is a really fun time. So if you guys ever want to come and watch paint dry, it's really, really fun. So that's where we have our testing board that I just talked about, a Democratic and a Republican representative. They each get 25 ballots. They mark those ballots, they hand tally them, and then when they come in, we run them through the tabulator and compare the results to their hand tally. Then they take those same ballots, they vote on the touchscreen machines, generate 25 more ballots, and compare those to the hand tally. So at the end of that time, they certify, if everything goes well, they certify that the machines are reading correctly, everything was done correctly, and then we seal any seals on the machine. We verify the seals haven't been broken if they're already sealed, and they'll certify that, and then we just don't touch those again until the election. We zero everything out, and the county doesn't do any more programming, so there's not going to be any more updates, no nothing until election time. Well, we don't change it after that. And then, like I said, everything is reset to 0. And then when the judges come in to start tallying ballots for the election, to start tabulating, we present them with a 0 report, and they go around and verify that every device has been zeroed out. We also use the results of that logic and accuracy test, that public test. We have a practice for our audit at the very end, and so we use those results and practice uploading to the state and being able to use that to practice the audit. And that is what happens when we program, and Rachel's going to let you know about SCORE, our voter registration.
Thank Okay, so all of the voter data in the state is contained within the statewide Colorado registration and election database, which is otherwise known as SCORE. You'll hear that term thrown around a lot if you're working as an election judge. We are responsible for updating voters' records, making changes to those. That's something that we do every day, and we receive that request a lot of different ways. So voters can go online to govotecolorado.gov and request an update to their record. It could be because they've moved, they just need to change a mailing address, or maybe they want to change their party affiliation. So there's all sorts of reasons for that. They can also withdraw their registration online if they've moved to another state or they just prefer to no longer receive ballots. So that's another request that we get. Other ways that we receive changes are paper forms. Those come to us via email, through the mail. They drop them off in person sometimes. Sometimes people just come in person to ask questions and end up making an update right then and there. Also, public health departments, individuals can update their records when visiting an office of that nature. And also, during voting time, our voter service centers are open. So that will prompt, many individuals to come in and make an update because maybe they didn't get a ballot. They moved and, they need to change their record. We also receive quite a bit of, changes to voter records that come directly from the state. So the state receives a list or that data from a specific agency. They take that data and they put it into SCORE for us, and then we will take care of the changes ourselves. So some examples of that would be the Colorado Department of Revenue. People update their driver's license or go in and get one for the first time. That information is automatically going to come to us to make changes. Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment sends us data on individuals in the county who are deceased, and their records need to be canceled. We receive information from Colorado Department of Corrections, also the Electronic Registration Information Center. We receive deceased records from that agency as well. And then lastly, from the National Change of Address. So you make a change to your mailing address through the United States Postal Service. There is a database that contains that information and allows us to update records for in-county moves, out-of-county moves. We'll pull individuals in maybe that move from Douglas County to Elbert County. We'll pull their record from Douglas County into Elbert County and get their record updated. So again, that information is provided in a database to Colorado Department of State. They put it into SCORE, and then the county processes those changes. In a lot of those cases, not all the individuals are going to be sent a letter. So they're able to see, yes, I was registered for the first time, all my information is correct, I'm good to go. Or yes, you updated my address because the county was recently notified that I moved, it's all correct. If for some reason it's not, sometimes there are instances where somebody moves out of a household and they check the wrong box on the form at the post office and accidentally update a whole family, and they shouldn't. So, the voter can rectify that. Every single letter that we send, for the most part, has a registration form on the back, so they can easily make the change and get that form back to us. Data entry for us is done on a daily basis. It's always, complete, up to date, and there is definitely just different criteria that we're required to follow. The National Voter Registration Act, requires that we, have certain list maintenance guidelines, and we follow certain procedures when we're making a change to a record. And so that concludes that portion, and Rhonda is up to present more to you. She's going to.
So we'll talk a lot tonight about what we do, but now I get to talk about voter responsibility. So we hear a lot about what's being done in elections, but there's things that voters can do to take responsibility for their own voter record. So you're responsible for updating your own voter registration. We've had, in fact, the last time we did this, there was a lady that stood up and she said, I've been getting a ballot for years for my daughter, and she hasn't lived there for years, and she's all mad at me. And I said, well, what did you do with it? Did you tell us? Did we know? And people think, well, we just toss it because it's junk mail, or we shred it, or whatever. But if it doesn't come back to us undeliverable, we can't make that record inactive with the way that the rules are. So we just keep sending ballots. So you're responsible for updating your own voter registration. You can't update other people's voter registration. If your neighbor moves away and you get a voter list and say, hey, they're still on the list and they moved away last year, think of any other legal document. Could you walk in and say, hey, you need to go change that? You could encourage them to change that, but you can't give us information that we can act on. If you know of any, or if you are military or overseas voters, please contact us and make sure we get those ballots out early, because we really want to take care of our military and overseas folks. So we want to make sure that we get that ballot to them. We send those ballots out 45 days before the election so that they have time to return them. There are some, we've had parents talk to us that wait till they get the ballot when we send all of them out, and then try to get it to their folks that are not home, and then have them get it back. So you can also, if you have kids in college, you have kids that are still registered to vote here, they can go on and change their mailing address and have it go straight to them, so that they have a chance to get that ballot in time. Because by the time you get the ballot and then you forward it, it doesn't give them a lot of time to get it back. Sometimes the post office, we don't know quite where it goes. And there are some things that you can do to help us clean up our voter rolls. So if you receive a ballot for somebody that doesn't live at your house any longer, on the back of the ballot is a big purple, of course, because I did it, a purple message. And it says, if you receive a ballot for someone that doesn't live at your address, write return to sender and return it to us. Then we can make that record inactive. We won't send ballots anymore until that person would have to update their record for them to be able to get a ballot. If you know somebody that has moved or they've changed mailing addresses, just remind them, hey, update your voter record. Because like Rachel talked about, we do get updates from motor vehicle, but how often do you update your driver's license? It may not be in time for the next election. So remind them that that's something that they might need to do, is update their mailing address. If you don't receive a ballot, one of the things you can do is go on to Go Vote Colorado and check your address. Make sure that it's correct, that the mailing address is correct. Know who to contact for information. Every election, we get calls from the party chairs that people have called them and said, hey, my ballot didn't come, what should I do? Well, we're the ones that you need to call. So we really want to make sure that you have an opportunity to vote, and we can help you. So just know that we're the ones to help you with voter registration, not getting your ballot, things like that. There are some voter resources to verify your registration. First of all, we should be your first point of contact. We love answering questions, and I'm a question asker, so you can ask me any question you want, and Rachel's just amazing at giving out that information and explaining it in a way that everybody can understand it. So we can help with voter registration, military and overseas voters. We can help with ballot replacement or receipt issues. We can only mail out ballots up until 8 days before the election. The post office has told us we just can't guarantee we can deliver it. If it gets mailed back to us then, but we also can't mail it out after that. So if it's within 7 days of an election, you'll probably need to come in and pick it up, but otherwise you can call us and we can pop another one in the mail. And Rachel talked about govotecolorado.gov. You can also check your ballot status on there. So you can get on and see whether we've received your ballot. So there's a barcode on that ballot. So when we receive it, we scan that barcode and it will show on your record, on your voter record, that we have received your ballot. So you can check that also. And again, just call us. The Secretary of State has an elections calendar. You can find that on their website, and it has all of the dates and the deadlines. It has the candidate deadlines, and so that's a great place to start to find out if you're thinking of running for office or anything like that. That's a great place to go. The other responsibility that voters have, and anybody that's been an election judge before is just going to laugh at this, because we see a lot of funny things get sent in on the ballot. So we send out, with the ballot packet, we send out some really nice instructions, and we go to a lot of trouble to get you that information. And on the ballot itself, it gives you pictures. This is how you color in a bubble. This is what you do if you made a mistake, and how to cross it out, and this is who you call. And this is what you do for a write-in. If you have a write-in candidate, we have, especially on the primary, a lot of people get confused because it's actually two different elections. There's a Democratic ballot and a Republican ballot, and people will just write in the name of who they want because they don't realize they're on the other ballot. You have to be a certified write-in candidate. You have to file paperwork to be a write-in. So unless there's a write-in line and that person has filed paperwork, it doesn't do anything to write that name in there. And if you fill out your ballot correctly, then nobody has to try to interpret what your ballot means. It will just go through the scanner and it'll get counted the way that you marked it. So read those voter instructions. They also have the locations and dates of the drop boxes when they're open. The voter service centers. In a general election, we have 3 voter service centers on election day. The rest of the elections, we have the voter service center just at our office. We have that one place, but it's right on there. You can, and when you drop your ballot off, we suggest dropping it off at a drop box. You can bring it into our office if you would rather do that, rather than sticking it in the mail and wondering whether it got there. We have bipartisan teams that pick up the ballots, and the drop boxes are under lights and surveillance. If you have not received your ballot within about 2 weeks of an election, go ahead and verify that your mailing address is good. Give us a call. You can check your status on Go Vote Colorado, or you could come vote in person. We have that option available. So there's a lot of things that voters can do to ensure that everything is correct on their end. And once we receive the ballots, Rachel's going to talk about what we do then.
Once the voter has, completed that voting process and they've signed their envelope and sealed it and they're ready to return the ballot, they do have some options. Voted ballots may be returned through the United States Postal Service. The majority of our voters choose to drop their ballots off in one of our 3 24-hour drop boxes. They're also welcome to come into the office in person, drop it off as well. We do receive from our military and overseas voters some ballots electronically through a secure portal. That's an option specifically for them. Another way ballots come back to us is through returned mail. So we do have those come directly from the United States Postal Service as well that could not be delivered. We have bipartisan teams that retrieve those ballots. They go out to the drop boxes and directly to the post office to pick up the ballots. At that time, they're establishing chain of custody of those ballots. So they are either put in a tub or a ballot bag, and they are sealed right there on site. The team takes the time to, verify this is the date, the time that we pick them up, and they sign that form indicating that, these are sealed. Once the ballots make it back to our main election office here in Kiowa, another team, the receiving team, will take that information and they'll verify it. They'll check that the number of the seal is the same as what's on the bag and that nothing has been tampered with and that chain of custody is intact. Once those ballots are taken out of the bag, they go through a counting process. We put them in small batches of 25 to start with, and they're counted at every station along the way. So, there's definitely, quite a few stations that those ballots go through, but to verify that, everything is the same and that we balance perfectly in the end, that's definitely an important step. After they're counted and they're put into those batches of 25, they're run through a document scanner, and that document scanner just captures the signature that's on the envelope, and then it takes that signature and puts it into a program and allows our election judges to look at the signature on the envelope on a computer screen right next to the signature that is located inside the score database for that voter. Most voters have lots of signature examples in their records. Some don't if they're just, a young new driver. But the judges will have, multiple signatures to look at to verify the signature on the ballot. So the voters have to sign the affidavit that's found on their envelope, and every signature on every single mail ballot is verified by our election judges before the ballot is actually counted. Signature verification training is something that our judges go through. That training is provided by the Secretary of State. If the verification team looks at the signature and it's just not a match, it doesn't, look anything like what's in score, then they have the opportunity to put that aside and reject that. And it does go through a second review. There's a second review team that'll take a look at it again, make sure that that determination was correct, and if it is, then the ballot is put in a rejected state. At that point, the procedure would be to send the voter a letter and let them know that their signature didn't match or their signature was missing, because a lot of people do forget to sign their ballot envelopes. And that letter goes out via mail. If the voter happens to have an email address in their voter record, we also send that letter to them via email, and it gives them an opportunity to get that information a little bit quicker. They have up until 8 days after Election Day to be able to, what we call cure, but just to fix that situation. They sign an affidavit stating that, yes, I'm the one that returned the ballot, it's really me. They sign the affidavit, and then they're required to return it with a copy of acceptable identification. So there's a list of, certain pieces of identification that an individual could submit to prove they are who they say they are, and they are the one that voted that ballot. They could mark no on that affidavit. Maybe, somebody else signed it. If that was the case, then that would be turned over to the district attorney. The methods that the voter has to fix that situation is they can bring that affidavit in person and hand it to us. They can email it back to us with a copy of their ID. They could mail it if they want to. I do get some of those in the mail. But we also offer an electronic way for them to do that. It's basically, there's some instructions on that form that we send them that allows them to just take care of it on their mobile device. And it's very easy. The information goes into a secure portal that we access and maintain or obtain that information from, so we can fix that situation. So once we receive that cure back, the ballot goes through the process, it's accepted, and will be counted from that point. Any ballot envelopes without an acceptable signature, it doesn't match, they will not be opened if the voter does not fix the situation, if they do not respond to our letter. And if they do not respond to our letter, then they receive a letter from the district attorney, because the district attorney does look into, investigates ballots that are not cured. So another reason why a ballot may not make it through that initial step is some individuals register and they do not have the appropriate identification at that time. Maybe I just moved into Colorado. I'm having trouble getting my driver's license because I have a birth certificate they don't like from another state, and it's just taking some time. They can still register to vote, they can still get a ballot, but they're required to submit an acceptable form of identification with their ballot inside the envelope. And sometimes they forget to do that. So that would be another reason why they would get a letter from us indicating they need to produce that within 8 days after the election in order for their ballot to be counted. So all ballots are received into SCORE, whether they're accepted or rejected. That's part of the process. So once we have your ballot, Rhonda talked about that specific barcode. It's an individual barcode. It's different for every single voter. That indicates to us in SCORE that your ballot has been received. So there's no way for you to come in and vote again, because that's already reflected in our system, and we wouldn't be able to produce another ballot. So that's basically what takes place through and after signature verification, and Dallas is going to talk about what happens with the ballots after that point.
Very good. So when we make it through the signature verification process, the envelope is still intact. The incoming envelope, it hasn't been opened. All that has been done is the signature on the back has been verified that was the person who returned the ballot, however way they returned it. And so from there, we go from our signature verification room into our ballot tabulating room. And that's where all the fun starts happening. Our first station in there, and there's the bat sheet that Rachel talked about, it follows along at every single station I'm going to be talking to you about. That bat sheet follows along. The judges sign off on it. That batch is continually counted as it goes through the system to make sure we're still on that 25. So the first station inside the tabulating room is the ballot opening station, the envelope opening. And we have our professional opener here tonight. Alan is our professional letter opener. And he will sit there for hours opening envelopes. He just is dedicated to getting it done. But it's an important job, because if we don't stack those just right and get that ballot where it has, and suddenly we start using that slicer and we start slicing ballots, it causes all kinds of problems for us, because then we've got to go back and duplicate that ballot and everything else. So in our training, I talk about that there's no unimportant job. They're all very important. And that is an example of that. Something that, get that off a little bit on those ballots and we start slicing off corners of ballots, we've got issues. So we go through that. That's the one station that we use that doesn't require a bipartisan team. One person can open an envelope. But it keeps the flow going, and in those batches of 25. Now this election, since it's a primary election, the people that are registered as unaffiliated get two ballots. They get both the Democratic and the Republican ballot, and they get to choose which one they want to return to us. When they first proposed to that, all of the clerks at the clerks' meeting was like, oh, that sounds like a nightmare. And it is. But the interesting thing about that, both parties lobbied to have that happen so that we would be able to mark which, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, to mark which ballot the unaffiliated return. And so this next step is a very important one, because when we undo that and we have the unaffiliated separated from the affiliated, so when we separate an affiliate envelope, we take the secrecy sleeve out. It's handed across the table to the person who's going to then take the ballot out. And so we keep that envelope separate from the ballot. Even though it's a bipartisan team that's working there, we keep it separate. So the person that's opening up that ballot from the secrecy sleeve can't see if a person has put a return address or the signature on that ballot. We want to keep voter anonymity, and that's how we take care of that. And so then those ballots are observed, they're looked at to make sure that there's no markings that would cause an issue with the scanning, which we'd go over with the judges. We want to make sure that nobody spilled the coffee or chocolate, and when we see brown smudges on the ballot, we really hope it's chocolate. That's what we just say it's chocolate. But any of those things that come on through the ballot, a personal identifying mark, someone signed their ballot instead of their envelope. Any of those things that the judges see when they open that up, we automatically duplicate that ballot. And so that's a whole separate system that the judges, the bipartisan team, will go over, where we have a ballot marking device set up in the counting room, and they will mark another ballot. They'll stamp those duplicate and original, and so they can be matched up later if it was ever needed to. And then the original ballot is put away into a box, and the duplicated ballot that is now clean and has no other things on it, we'll call it clean, Alan, and it gets put back into the batch. So that ballot is still counting as it was originally intended, but because of some issues that may or may not cause it to scan correctly, we sure don't want to gum up our scanner, right? If someone has spilled their coffee on it and it's got all that on it, we want to keep all that clean. And so that duplication process is very important. A lot of people have talked about that within the scanned images, then as we go to them, that there might be personal information in those scanned images. And those images are public records. People can request those. But we have to go through a redaction process to do that, just to make sure that there's no personal information on those. Well, we kind of head that off at the pass by doing the observation of the ballot when we pull it out to make sure there's nothing there and duplicate it. So we kind of anticipate that having to be done, and so we take care of that as we're going through the process. And so on the actual ballots that are scanned in, there should be no identifiable information on there. Now, that's a regular ballot. That's a person that is declared their affiliation, and they've returned either the Republican ballot or the Democratic ballot. Now, the packets that come back that have the unaffiliated, they get dealt with a little bit differently because we have to mark which ballot that unaffiliated voter returned. The parties want to know that. And so the clerks were mad at both parties over that one because we didn't want to do it. It just causes an extra problem for us. So instead of just having two people then that do that, the unaffiliated packets, we have three. We can put a team of three judges together because we need someone who's going to pull the packet out like we did with the regular ballots. Then we got to have someone else that pulls out the ballot and verify and call out they returned the Republican ballot or they returned the Democrat ballot, and the person has to mark that down on where it is. So it's a little bit tricky to keep the voter anonymity and keep it with which ballot they returned, but we've got it worked out, and it works best with us doing that three-person team to make sure that happens. From that point, the ballots, once they've been opened and they've been separated from the envelope, and we do it correctly, there's no way to put that envelope back with the ballot that it came from, and that's the way it should be. We want that complete voter anonymity. We already know that this is a good ballot, and we keep those separate. Question
all right now?
Go right. Well, yeah. There's so many of us here.
On the unaffiliated ballot, when they open that up, and both of them come in the same envelope, the one that they fill out and the one that is blank?
So they're instructed to just return one. But you know how people are. They don't always read instructions.
How is it handled when?
So when they return both ballots,
Either all the different situations, either they vote both ballots.
they vote both of them.
Or they vote one, and then what happens to the blank?
Leave the blank one. So if they return both ballots and both ballots are voted, can we tell which one they really intended to vote? No. So it gets pushed to the side. Okay, it's not on there. If they return both ballots and they were just being a good citizen and they said, I didn't want this blank ballot floating around out in wherever, and so I wanted to return this blank ballot, but I really voted this ballot, that's pretty obvious what the voter intent was, right? And so that's the ballot that we'll count and use for it. So that's the guidance that we have from the state.
So invalid, or,
Yes.
and then where does that paper go?
It's set aside, and we keep them, but it's put aside so that they're in a separate bin, and everything is taken care of so that's in a separate area.
So there's no, you don't reach out to that voter to ask them.
At that point, we don't know, right? Because that's after the secrecy sleeve has been separated from the envelope, and then the next person that's on the line is opening this up, and we've already got this all shuffled and mixed up. Well, suddenly we have the secrecy with both ballots, and there's no way to go backwards through the system to figure it out. Correct. They return both of them. Yes.
Let's say they return both of them, but the one before it, they only return one, right? So the next one you pull out and it's got two from the envelope that that person still has to be able to identify which way that independent voter voted. What you're saying
At that point, it's determined if the two ballots that are there, those other two determine if they've both been voted or not. If they've both been voted, they're both void. If only one is voted, then the two judges agree that this is the one that was voted, and the other one is to put in the discard pile. And we still, at that point, those two judges have no clue who the ballots are. Because the envelope is
Yeah.
already
Okay, go for it.
to the other judge.
Rhonda's going to fix something.
Okay, so we are pulling them out one at a time. And the reason for that is so we can record which election they voted in, Democratic or Republican. So you're absolutely correct. If we pull it out, we're ready to record that. And if the judge that's looking at the ballots pulls out the ballots and says, there's two voted ballots here, those ballots go back in the envelope. We reject it on the voter's record. They do not get a letter because it is not curable. So the letters that we send out are letters that the voters can cure or fix that situation, but they voted two ballots. That is not curable, so they don't get turned in to the DA like they would if they turned in. So if they vote on Tuesday and turn in a ballot on Wednesday, then we talk to the DA. But we just put those ballots back in the envelope and we store that and we record that and we log that. So we do know whose those are at that point.
And I assume, though, that, when the independents get their envelope that has both ballots in it, it says, if you return both of these, neither will be counted.
Absolutely, they have different instructions. And the unaffiliateds get yellow envelopes. So it does cause some confusion because we get calls, people hopping mad saying, you forgot to send me both ballots. And somebody else in my household got two. Where's mine? So we just can ask them whether they have a white or yellow envelope.
The cover letter, the transmittal, I guess, answers my question.
Correct.
So the
Yes.
Democratic ballot are same
Yes.
color.
Yeah, so we put a red bar across the top of the Republican ballot, a blue bar across the Democratic ballot, and they're exactly the same. So that's a purple one. Yeah, that's Rhonda. She likes purple. But the actual ballot that has just the Democratic candidates and just the Republican candidates are separated, but the ballot itself is the exact same ballot, whether it's going into an affiliated packet or an unaffiliated packet, because they're there. So that brings up a good point. What Rhonda said, we have a yellow envelope for the unaffiliateds, and so we sort those out, and we handle those a little bit different. The affiliated ballots go to one table, the unaffiliated ballots go to another table, but once it's determined that those ballots are good, they all go together and we shuffle those up. Okay, well, we've verified that those are going to be good ballots, are going to be counted. We shuffle those up, so there's no way to put those back into those original batches of 25. And then we number them, 1 to 50. 1 to 50, 1 to 50, 1 to 50. And that's an important thing that I'll be talking about later of why we do that. But it's back to there's no unimportant jobs, because if suddenly we have two number 13s in a ballot batch, we got a problem. So that's a very important job. We use green pins on that because it's going to stand out. It's going to reflect on the scanning, and we'll be able to tell that that's what's the right ballots that go through there. So as we get the batches of 50 together, so now we've got brand new batches. So we're no longer in the batches of 25. We're now in batches of 50 after we've disassembled from the packets. And then we run that through our scanning computer. We have a high-speed scanner connected to what we call our ImageCast Central, and it runs through the 50 ballots. Question? Oh, you just thought it was a good thing? So we scan those through. Those are all logged. The computer pulls up and says, yep, we just ran 50 through. The judges can say, accept that batch. Everything is logged, and so we know the first batch is 50. At the end of the second batch, we got 100. At the end of the third batch, we got 150. And we just keep going 50 by 50. Those get clipped together and stored. After that's scanned, it's sent to the EMS server, election management server, where everything is tabulated through that server. So that the scanning process is just going there. The scanning computer is also very important because it also, if there's some type of a discrepancy within the way that the person voted, it's going to send it to adjudication, and Rhonda's going to talk to you about what's involved with that. So all those processes that we go through that I just talked to you, other than opening the envelope, have a minimum of a bipartisan team. The unaffiliated packet removal has a team of 3. And so nobody works by themselves except poor Alan and all those that he recruits to help him open up envelopes.
Why a team of 3?
The rolling pin.
Oh, yeah, the rolling pin. That was a really important one. So sometimes the ballots, when they get folded and they kind of have make a little W or something with them. And Rhonda had the great idea that the best way to fold those out was she brought in a rolling pin. And so we had some that their role was to, our big long speak we had going there through that. So there's some little adaptations that we do to make things work faster and work a little bit better. But as those ballots are scanned, then it makes an image of them, it sends them over to the EMS server, and Ronald's going to talk to you about adjudication. If there's some reason that it's not clear on that ballot how that should be tabulated, it goes to what we call adjudication. And so Rhonda's going to talk about adjudication. Find an animal of a different, work with an animal of a different, whoever you are, whoever you identify as. Anyway, find a different animal to work with. And so as long as there's 2 animals and 1 animal, we're okay. But if we have 3 animals at the same time, then we got a problem. Yeah, then they can gang up. So we avoid that.
So a couple of things about that. The yellow envelopes are unaffiliated. The unaffiliated voters also have the option to designate which ballot they would like to receive. So we may have white envelopes, which are generally people that are affiliated with a party that are actually unaffiliated voters. So it's not necessarily, if they're white envelopes, you can't necessarily tell. Because if they can get on their record and say, I have a preference. Please only send me this ballot. And then we don't send them both. And we don't have to go through that process to figure out which one. And the other thing is, we're required to print our sample ballots on colored paper. So, I chose purple, but yes, we're required. So once those, what's that? Or violet, yeah. Violet's my new favorite color. So once those ballots are scanned into the system, The ballot images may be sent to adjudication to determine the voter intent. So just like the old Scantron machines, if you color in the bubble, they look for that marking in the target area. We always have a bipartisan team, and often we do adjudication in Elbert County at the end of the day, and a lot of times we have everybody in the room sitting and looking at those ballot images, and certainly if there are any questions on what decision to make, the judges that are doing the adjudication do pull in other judges. We have a voter intent guide. It's got all sorts of pictures in it. So if you have a scenario that you're just not sure what to do, that voter intent guide is really actually pretty good, and it will tell you how you should adjudicate that ballot. So some of the reasons that the ballots are sent to adjudication, if we have a completely blank ballot, like why would people send completely blank ballots through? We don't know, but if it's completely blank, it gets sent so the judges can take a look at it and say, is this really blank? Did they mark outside the lines? We had one a few years ago that I looked at, and it looked like a little old person. It was very, very shaky, and they had colored in, but they missed the bubble on every single one. It was just to the side of the bubble, and I think their glasses maybe just weren't working so well. But there's some reasons that they're blank, but a lot of times they're just completely blank. So we review every one of those. If there's an overvote, so if you have more than one choice and you choose both of those and you don't mark one out to show us your intent, then we just go ahead and send that ballot through. And that contest is counted as an overvote, so it's not counted, and the rest of the ballot will be counted as it's marked. If you voted for one and then you followed those lovely instructions on the top of the ballot and said, no, I really don't want that one, you crossed it out, you voted for the other one, all the machine sees is that there's 2 votes. So that goes through as an overvote, and then when the judges see it, it's obvious what the voter intent is. So they can go ahead and take off the vote for the one that the voter intended to not vote for. If there's what we call an ambiguous mark, so if there's not enough of the circle filled in, so they don't look that you're supposed to fill in the circle, and they make a check mark, and they check marked all of the ovals, well, the machine will say, there's not much in here, but we see something in the circle. So it'll send that ballot image over for the judges to review, and then they can look at it on the screen and say, yeah, they voted, they just put check marks instead of filling in the bubble.
So how do the judges correct that so that the machine can read that?
So you can add votes and take away votes.
The judges can.
They can do that, yeah. And then we have a record of which ones were adjudicated. We can go back and review those and check those out. But that's another reason that we have at least one bipartisan team, but we usually have a bunch of people over there because we want to make sure that we honor that voter intent, and we don't want to get that wrong, because we want to make sure that we get that one right. Every single write-in is sent to adjudication because the machine doesn't try to read that. So if there's something written in the blank for a valid write-in spot, or if they colored in the bubble, it goes to the write-in. And the name of the valid write-in or write-ins is programmed in, so they have a drop-down, and they say, was it, John Smith? Was it this person? And the judges say, yes, it was, no, it wasn't. It was. So we either count valid write-ins or invalid write-ins. So we don't keep track of how many times people vote for Mickey Mouse, because usually that's who wins on write-ins. People get very creative sometimes. But we only keep track of whether it's valid or whether it's not valid. We don't keep track of who they write in for every single one. We do have a record of every ballot that was adjudicated and the changes that were made. So I can bring up a report and say, this one was adjudicated to take off a vote for this person. So we can go back and look at those. And then we get to election night. So we can print out a results report at any time. We've been doing this whole process that we've talked about, and we've scanned all these ballots in. I could bring up a report at any time, 6:30 on election night, and it's going to show you zeros. We do not have access to the results, and any results files that we can see are encrypted, so they're just a whole bunch of symbols on the page, and there's 3 different ones. So we have no way of knowing those results until election night. And at 7 p.m. on election night, we get to push the magic button. It's called Validate and Publish. So any of those that are already scanned in, which is, 95 at least % of the ballots, are already scanned in to the system. And so the first results that we get are those ballots that are already scanned in. So we print out a paper report of those ballots that are already scanned in. We do an export so we can upload those results to the Secretary of State's office. And then we stay and we have election judges by each of the drop boxes that we have because the polls close at 7 p.m. So we have a set of judges by the drop box in Elizabeth, and they pick up those ballots and they lock the box so you can't put any more in. And one out at Singing Hills, we have one by the drop box by our office. And so those judges are still picking up ballots. They bring those ballots back, and generally in Elbert County, we're able to go ahead and process those ballots and report the results for those ballots also. On election night, if we get too many and we're just all bleary-eyed, there's just no point in doing that. So, every once in a while we will save those and do them the next day. But we may have 1 or 2 more uploads for that election night before we go home. And all results are unofficial until the end of, until canvass, sorry. Lost the word there. And on election night, before the judges leave, as we do every single night in the counting room and in the voter service center, we balance. We make sure we have the same number of envelopes, we have the same number of ballots that we've run through the scanner, and we have a report of the judges that got credit for, or the voters that got credit for voting. And those numbers are all, they come from separate places, and those all match. And we make sure that they match before we leave. And again, any results are unofficial, which people don't generally notice that the results are changing because most of the time the races are far enough apart that it's like, okay, this is what the results are. But if you have a really close race, then people will be looking and they'll be wondering why there's different numbers after election night. And so I had mentioned that one of the things that I do is we do an export to send to the Secretary of State's office, and Rachel is going to tell you about that.
So like Rhonda mentioned, the results are definitely unofficial at that point in time. After 7 p.m., we do take those results from the voting system and we upload them to a secure election night reporting site. And we do that as a team. So we'll take the paper results that she has printed out with us when we complete that upload, and then we'll look at what it's going to be prior to publishing it to the public. And those numbers have never not matched, but we just take the time to go through the contests and make sure that those printed results match exactly what's being published for the public to see, and that everything is the same. And we do that every single time that we complete an upload, like she talked about. Ballots are still coming in, judges are bringing them back from the drop boxes, so we'll complete that same process again. But what I really wanted to cover was, there are post-election activities that can change the results. And it's just important to know, why that can occur. So ballots can be dropped off in any county in the state. Sometimes people just happen to be in another area and they have their ballot with them. But most of the time it's because people work, in town. And they're there already, they have their ballot, they're just going to drop it in another drop box. So it happens here as well. We get ballots for other counties, and we're required to, accept those as, all county clerks are required to accept those. We date stamp them, write down the time that we receive them. That way we can get those sent back to the other county and they can process those. So those are still coming in after Election Day. We talked about the cures, the voters being able to fix those issues they had with their signature or their missing identification. Those are also going to be counted after Election Day. Our military and overseas voters have the opportunity to get the ballot back to us as long as they transmit it by 7 p.m. on Election Day. So if they put it in the mail on Election Day and it gets to us before that 8-day deadline, it's also counted. So those are just some reasons why those numbers would change. There are other post-election activities that we're required to complete prior to the certification of the election. And one of those activities is the risk limiting audit. And Dallas is going to talk to you about that. We have to have them back by that 8-day time period. Yes. And so we go to, extra lengths, ballots are overnighted, things of that nature to ensure that counties have them on time so they'll be counted. That's a good question.
Are they still using the portal? That you're notifying them electronically its own way? You scan it and send it to them?
Oh, yes, yes. So one other thing that we do is we make a copy of the ballot envelope, which shows the signature, and it's uploaded into a secure portal, and those are put out there for each individual county, so that way the counties can complete signature verification right away. Because if someone dropped off their ballot in Douglas County and the signature doesn't match or they forgot to sign it, and it takes time to get to us, that kind of just cuts down the amount of days the voter has to cure their ballot. So in order for that to happen faster and help the voters in that situation, we're able to just get an image of the ballot. We can look at it, the judges can complete the signature verification process, make sure everything is okay, and then we just wait for that ballot to come in before it goes through the counting room. That's a good point.
Okay, so we're almost done. We're getting there. We're getting close to an hour. A little bit past. I got to talk fast. Can you all listen quick? So at the end of the election cycle, we have to do what's called a risk limiting audit. And that is something that we do with the canvas board. We bring in a couple of our lead judges to assist in that. And this is where, remember I said it's important, those number 1 through 50 on those batches becomes very important. So what happens is, first of all, a definition of the risk limit audit is that it's an audit that we pull specific ballots to make sure that the outcome of the race was within a statistical margin of error. And so whatever the risk limit the secretary says we need to have, it goes into their algorithm, at 3% or 4%, whatever the case may be. It goes in the algorithm, and then based on the margin, the ballots across the state, all that, we are told then how many ballots we're going to have to do our audit on in the next county, how many they're going to do, and so forth. And so we end up having, if the wider the margin, the fewer ballots that we have to audit. The closer the race, the more we have to do. For races like that are across the whole state, of course, then the whole state is taken into account with that. So we may be pulling some statewide races as well as all the other counties with the audit. And so what they do is they tell us you need to pull 15 ballots, say. with a particular race that's been chosen that we're going to audit. And what they send to us is say you need to go into this specific batch, use a specific ICC. We usually use just one, so it's all the same. The specific ICC, the specific batch, and the specific batch number. So they'll send it to us, say you need to get into batch 56, and you need to pull batch 32. And it'll go through the list like that. And so we bring the judges in, we open up all the buckets that we've been using to store, and we have placeholder papers that they go in as they pull out those ballots. Then as they go through and use the RLA tool, we put it on a screen, everybody's watching, and we're able to actually compare what the actual ballot was versus what the scanned image was and where we are with how the vote was recorded. And we have to go through and mark each one of those to make sure it's the right ballot. And so it's a pretty involved process. The problem that a lot of people have is they have a hard time understanding how 15 ballots is going to verify the outcome of the race. And it's hard for people to understand that. I, at times, have a hard time understanding how that's going to do. It's a lot of math, a lot of statistics, and all that stuff that goes into deciding how many ballots and what ballots that we're going to pull. If for any reason we fall outside that margin of acceptable risk, we go to round 2, and then we go to round 3. And if it's a statewide race, and where all the counties are dependent on each other to make sure that we're following, making sure that gets done correctly. Because that's kind of hard for us to understand, particularly myself, on how 15 ballots are going to verify. The last few years, we've done what the state has asked, but we've gone the extra mile as well. And there's several other counties now that I've been talking to that are starting to see that this is a good idea as well. Is we do a bottom-up RLA instead of a top-down coming from the state down to us. We go in and we let the judges pick. Last time we did 500 of the ballots. And so then Rhonda, Rachel are able to look at those batches, pull up the image, the CVR file, and then we go through those batches. So we're verifying more than what is the minimum requirement from the state, but we're doing more. At the end of that, when all of that is taken care of, then we do our canvass. We talk with their 2-party reps and myself that have to sign off on that we balanced, everything is done correctly, and then that election is signed, sealed, and delivered once the RLA is taking place. And so that's when we get the last report Rachel's talking about with election night reporting. We can do that last upload and say, change these to final results instead of pending, unofficial. Go from unofficial to official.
Is it always 15 ballots?
No, it could be, I was just number I threw out.
And
So,
they tell you how many?
yeah.
And if you have to go to a round 2, is it separate samples?
Yeah, different ballots in round 2.
Number.
It's usually a smaller number because it's getting ratcheted down as it goes along because they're still using that first round and the second round to get to the numbers that we need to be. We've been pretty fortunate over the years. We never had to do a huge number. Lincoln County here, our neighbors to the east, they always seem to get huge numbers, and they're a way smaller county where we look at the report and suddenly they're having to do 300 ballots and we're doing 25. So it's just. I don't understand how they determine all that. It's math that's beyond me, but that's the way the state is the one that takes care of that. Yeah.
I'm sitting here thinking, we've got so many factors that contribute to a really good election, honest, straightforward. Why is there so much doubt about that?
Well, we can get into that a little bit. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. We had to do a lot of things right in Colorado, and I think when you hear everything that we've done and what Colorado's standards are, we do a lot of things correctly. But there's always things that can be enhanced, and so that leads right into where I was going next. Last summer, the association put out a paper of things that they would like to see enhanced within Colorado. And so these are the clerks that we put this together. These were things that was unanimous from the clerks of what we thought we could do, go the extra mile, just to continue to get better and continue to get better. This was going to be the clerks over the past was going to be it was a year ago 21 through now into the legislative session that we just got through, working with the secretary and making rules to help add these two. But along the way, this got kind of pushed to the side with all the other stuff that was going on in elections and the secretary having a different priority. And so I hope the association can keep this going. And I'll tell you what the association was looking for. They were looking for an opportunity for the ballot images and the cast vote record to be made available to public at no cost. Now, those things are open records. People can request those through the Colorado Open Records Act. We have to go through and redact, like I was talking earlier, if there's any personal information on that. But those are open records. The problem with just going through it as being an open records request, that can take hours and hours and hours of time. And the way the Open Records Act reads, then the person that's requesting that open records gets billed for those hours, and so it can get quite pricey. And so the association is saying, hey, it's out there. Let's make this available at no cost. Pueblo and El Paso counties did that this past election. They piloted a program to put that out there so people could have access to all those ballot images, and that was something that the association pushed for more transparency. Another thing the association was looking for over the past year was more signature verification audit processes. Rachel touched on it a little bit, Rhonda did as well, that we're to audit, but there's no definition of what audit is, the judges that are doing the signature verification. And so what the association would like to see would be have a very defined procedure to how we audit how well a election judge is doing signature verification, so that it's set in a very tight policy, parameters, and all that stuff, similar like how we do an RLA. We know what we got to do to check and verify on that. We want to see a system like that where we have that on signature verification. It's a little tricky for the bigger counties on that, because number one, their volume of ballots, but they also use a scanner that does a lot of the reading of it. So there's still work to be done there, but that's something that the association sees as an opportunity to enhance voter confidence in what we're doing, is making sure we're auditing that signature verification process. The other thing that the association was looking for was a voter list maintenance review / audit, so that the SCORE statewide database had some sort of a formal audit process on it as well, where you could go in and check and verify that the voters that are on the rolls are the ones that actually should be there, that they're legally there, and have that fully transparent voter roll. And so while we do a lot of things right, there's also things that we want to enhance and be more transparent in. And that was something that the association, it's a formal letter, you all are welcome to look at that later, as far as what we wanted to go after. And so I hope that doesn't go away, because I think those are all things that build confidence as we go along. For me personally, a couple things that bother me that we do within the state is we do rely heavily on the post office. And not to knock the post office, they do a lot of, they got a lot of volume, and I understand that. But I think, how many out here have ever had trouble with their mail? Sometimes it happens, right? No, that didn't help much at all. And so we're very reliant on the post office, particularly larger rural areas where they don't have immediate access to a drop box, and perhaps the best and only way they have to get their ballot back is through the mail. They talked about even the post office themselves don't mail it within 8 days of the election. And so finding a way that we can take that out of the mix would certainly help things. The other thing I think that really hurts rural Colorado is the automatic voter registration. And so now anytime a person interacts with a state agency or Health and Human Services, or particularly with the motor vehicles where we're at right now, it automatically registers the person to vote, whether they wanted to or not. They're automatically registered. The problem is a lot of the people that are administering those driver's license, they're not really interested in elections, right? They're focused on getting a driver's license. So they're not fully aware or trained or care as much as we do about it. So lots of times people aren't aware that that's happening to them. So it's an instance where government is doing something to a person instead of what a person is requesting to have happen. And I have a perfect example right here. In the back is my wife of 30 years and 1 day. She's put up with me for that long, so I'm happy that she's here. We have a son, twins actually, just turned 21 in April, and one of them got their new driver's license. They wanted to get their new driver's license. Well, with the automatic voter registration, even though Cody was already registered to vote, because it showed up that there was a change in his registration, he got a letter. And this letter causes these ladies a lot of grief. And the reason is the very first sentence. We received notice from the Colorado Department of Revenue that you recently changed your address or your name. Well, did Cody change his address or his name? No. So we get a lot of calls from people that are not happy because they get this letter. I didn't change my name. I didn't change my voter registration. All I did was renew my driver's license. And what the system does, and I've complained about this plenty, even if all that changes, and this is what happened, what generated the letter for Cody, is they added the 4 digits on the end of the mailing address and the physical address, and it counted as a change in his address. And so it generates this letter, right? And of course, Cody's heard me fuss about this at home, so he understood to put his mailing address on there. But for people that don't understand it, and that's the first thing they read, is you've changed your name or you changed your address, it causes a lot of grief for our staff to do with it. Additionally, just a minute, Jason, I'll skip to you. In addition, Cody's heard me talk about that if we have a post office box, instead of just getting mail at your home, it's important that you have that listed on there. Now, most people, when they go to get a new driver's license, they're just thinking the address that's where they live, right? They're not necessarily thinking of their mailing address. And so if in their record, on their voter record, they have a mailing post office box. How many people here have a post office box? Right? We live 2 miles from ours. I want a post office box. So we have a mailing address. If Cody had not put in a specific mailing address at the motor vehicles place, it would have tried to send this letter and his driver's license to our physical address, not the P.O. box, and it's not going to get there. And so what ends up happening is we end up with people who don't get a ballot because we've automatically changed it, even though we know when we go through to tab that automatic registration that they've got a P.O. box, but the form that we get from the state says you got to take that off because they didn't put it on when they renewed their driver's license. So suddenly now we've removed their mailing address from their voter registration, so the next time we send ballots out, guess where it's going? To their physical address. And what happens when you send a physical ballot to my address? It's getting returned. It can't be delivered. And so the automatic voter registration has caused a lot of trouble for us in the rural counties. And it's heartbreaking for us when we have a person who's maybe a little bit older comes in. I've been living in this house for 25, 30 years. Why did you do this? Why do I have to come in now and pick up a ballot when I'm supposed to be on this mail ballot system? And so I've harped on that as much as I can. So far, it's fallen on deaf ears. There's been no adjustments to that. It causes us a lot of problems. Along those lines, what happens also at the motor vehicle system, which is troubling to me, is Colorado now allows undocumented people to get a driver's license. And when they first started talking about this a couple years ago, and they were talking about it, the templates they were showing us, the number configuration for that driver's license number is the same as ours, yours and mine, right? The 2, 3, 4, it's a 2, 3, and 4. And I was like, whoa, let's make this easy. Let's do this as a different configuration number so that a person that's looking at a voter registration form can tell right away that this number is not to be used for voter registration purposes. Well, I didn't listen to that either. And we're yet to hear from other counties, because we ask at conferences if they've ever had a voter registration flagged with one of those it says on the actual license, not used for voter identification, or not for a voter. But if they just fill out the form and have that number, we're yet to come across anybody who's had that flagged and popped up and said it wasn't. So I think that's an issue. It's an easy one. To me, it would be able to fix. That's something that we could do better.
Have they started doing that now?
No.
That's proposed.
That's what I would like to see happen. But
Are they issuing either driver's license
yes.
or ID to non-residents?
Yes. That being said, there are things that Colorado does well, and there's some bases that you've heard all the details kind of tonight, but there's 3 basic things that need to happen as a good foundation to make sure you have a system that's going to work for people and get a good, fair, accurate count. One is that you have a statewide voter database. And while SCORE may have its issues, and we as an association would like to see an audit on it, having that statewide database is important. We are able to see when people move from another county to our county. We pull them in with the state database. We're able to see when a person a few years ago that moved from Douglas County right about the same time as the election, they'd received their Douglas County ballot. They also, when they moved here, changed their voter registration to Elbert. It was in the period of time when we could mail out a ballot, so we mailed them a ballot from Elbert. They returned both of them. Okay, they returned their Douglas County ballot about 15 minutes before we scanned ours, so it became our problem, not Douglas County's. But without that statewide database that would automatically notify us that a person had returned 2 ballots, there'd be no way that we could know. A couple years ago, at one of the conferences, I had the opportunity to sit with the Assistant Secretary of State in Ohio. And they were in the process of trying to move toward a statewide database. And I was talking to her. I said, well, how does that work? And she said, well, every county maintains their own database. Okay, well, do you talk to each other? Or, like if there's an interstate move from county to county, do you let them know? No, it's kind of everybody kind of does their own thing there. And so that, to me, is ripe for people to take advantage of that situation, right? And so having that statewide database is important, that we have that here in Colorado, that we can see when that happens. Second thing that's a foundational issue is to have a paper ballot for every vote. So even the people that come in and vote in person on an election, it prints out a paper ballot. So we have a paper ballot. Otherwise, there'd be no way we'd ever go back and do a hand count and verify or do anything if all it was on a machine. Now, way back before we got our new system, they had a little printer on the side, and it was old technology, and it was difficult to use. But having that paper ballot is vital. So part of what we're able to do, and what we've committed to do for this election, the primary, and in November, what we did with Park and Rec, we're gonna hand count every contested race after everything's completed, just for verification that everything is like it should be. The only way we can make that happen is if you have a system to kind of compare to. It kind of goes together. And so when we do that, Rhonda or Rachel are able to pick that specific batch that's being hand tallied. We know what the result should be from that specific batch. We know what the hand tally batch is, and they should match up. If not, we're able to go back and say, okay, where's the problem? 100% of the time at the Park and Rec one, it was human error, right? Hand counting ballots is harder than it looks. But having that system to back up to and be able to verify and know exactly what in that batch is important. And so we have those paper ballots. It's a foundational thing, and we can go back and verify what's there. And the third thing that Colorado does very well, and we're always very conscious of in Elbert County, is working in bipartisan teams. Not that we think that any of our judges are going to do anything they shouldn't do, but it's just a check and balance to make sure that everything is above board and there. And we've heard reports from across the country. Sometimes that doesn't happen. But I know we do that here in Elbert, and the people that a lot of the clerks I know personally take care of that as well. And so you have to have those three foundational issues that you have to build on. The statewide voter database, the paper ballot, and using bipartisan teams. And that's got to be the foundation to build going forward.
Can the person that wants to be a poll watcher, not a judge, can they be a poll watcher at a different county
Sure.
and request to be that?
So a watcher has to be appointed. Like this was full of candidates on the primary, you'd have to have a candidate that appointed you to be a watcher for them, and you'd be assigned them. Watchers have a specific role. They have specific classes that they need to take to become certified, and that's what they do. They're just there to observe, which is different than what the judges do. The judges are there to work, and whatever station they're at, that's what they should be focused on, and making sure that everything is done on that station correctly. So yes, that's another role. We didn't get into that tonight, but yes, watchers are a vital part of what goes on in elections.
Is there a time limit that you have to apply to do that?
You just have to show up with your certificate, and the clerks always like to know ahead of time if you're coming. It's a little bit easier, but you have to have that certification and the appointment.
Because I remember it wasn't a poll watcher, but it was an auditor from the state that was in and observed us doing the counts in the 16 election.
So the Secretary of State's office has the prerogative to send their staff out to observe and make sure everything is going as it's supposed to. And so that happens from time to time as well, and they have that authority to do that.
Can I ask him?
Sure.
This was actually when Rhonda was covering this area, but I held back. What is the state database? How do they handle purging the rolls when deaths occur out of state? So the death certificate is issued for someone in a different state. Do they talk to other states and purge the rolls that way, or is purging of the rolls for deaths done in the county? Or
Well, we try not to say purge to begin with. So they would go to inactive status or canceled are the two ways that people don't get ballots. And so we would get notification, I assume, through the CDPHE if they get that notification. The ERIC system also does it for the states that are part of that. Rachel talked about the electronic whatever. There's 31 states, and it's the I don't know, but yeah, registration something. But what would happen is if that person had moved out of state and they still had a ballot that was active here, we would mail it to their address, and then when it comes back to us, then we could mark them as inactive.
Yeah, but I'm thinking of somebody that didn't move out of state, who just were deceased out of state. But if there's not a family member that volunteers to do that,
And like Dallas said, then if we send the ballot and it comes back to us, at least we won't be sending anymore.
Right.
But it's like everything else legal, we're gonna have to have some documentation
Yeah.
before we
right.
And we had a situation this last fall where we did have someone that had passed after the ballots were sent out, who returned their ballot. It was kind of a miracle how that happened. But the system caught that immediately. As soon as it went to scan that we received that ballot, it immediately popped up that this was a deceased voter, and so we were able to pull that and send that on to the DA because that shouldn't have been happening. Rebecca. Envelope. Yep.
We tend to say turn in your ballots, but what
Well, thank you all very much for coming. We appreciate it. Hope you found it informative. We'll stay as long as Kirk has questions, but if anybody wants to continue to listen to it, you can. But really, we appreciate it. For those of you who are going to be election judges for us, I hope you found it informative, and look forward to it. Ballots go out next week, so we'll be able to look for your ballot in the mail, and we're gonna do it upright. I told the judges this week as we were doing our orientation, probably less than 10,000 ballots is what we're looking at, simply because it's a primary. We know that's a lower turnout election. But also on top of that, in Elbert County, the Democratic ballot does not have any contested races on it, and there's only a handful on the Republican side. And so a lot of people will look at that and not, what's the point? It's an uncontested ballot, really. And so that's going to suppress some vote. There's not a lot of options for people to vote on this time. So we're looking at less than 10,000. We'll pick up quite a bit more in November. We'll hit 17,000, 18,000, 19,000 in November. But this will be another good election.
Well, thank you, Dallas. Great job.
Yep. Thank you. And, these ladies are phenomenal. I'd take them anywhere to do an election. They do a great job.